Hi guys, I Aziz welcome you to CoedMaster. So today's video is going to be a very interesting video for you because today we are going to implement for each method of Java array class. So guys, these type of questions are generally asked in the interview. So if you are preparing for your upcoming interviews, make sure to watch this video till the end. So without wasting any time, let's get started. Alright guys, let's go to browser. Now here I have opened the documentation for Array.forEach method. So let's scroll down and see what is the syntax for each method. So the syntax for each method is like this. So the for each method basically accepts two arguments. One is the callback function and the second one is the this argument. Now what is the callback function? So callback function is a function which will be executed once for each element of the array. And what is the purpose of for each method? The for each method is used to iterate over all the elements of the array. Okay. Now this callback function again accepts three arguments. Number one is the element of the array on which we are iterating. Number second argument is the index on which we are iterating. It may be 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. And the third argument is going to be the array itself. Okay. And the fourth optional argument is this argument. Now this argument is going to be used as a this binding for this callback. Okay. So far so good. Now I have a surprise for you that in this video, we are not going to implement this for each loop by ourselves. Instead, we will see the JavaScript specification, and by looking at the JavaScript specification, we are going to implement this method. So to see the specification, let's go to CoedMaster specification. This is the 15th edition, which is the latest edition of JavaScript specification or CoedMaster specification. Now let's jump directly to for each method. Now here you will see the entire algorithm which will be implemented by all the JavaScript engines. In our case, we are using a Chrome based browser, so it is a V8 engine, and this algorithm is implemented by V8. Okay, let's read a little bit about it. So on the top you will see that it is written what is callback function. So as I said, callback function is a callback function which will be executed once for each element of the array. And this argument is going to be this binding for the callback function. So far so good. And on the bottom you will see that this method is intentionally a generic method. So what does it mean? It means that this method is going to be a generic method, which means this method can be used on arrays as well as non-arrays or array-like objects. If you don't know about the array-like objects, don't sweat. I will explain what are array-like objects in a bit. Okay. Now what we are going to do, we will read this algorithm step by step, and then we are going to implement all the steps one by one. Okay. So let's head over to VS Code. Now let's open the terminal. Let's create one file, app.js. Close the terminal, open the file, and we are good to go. Now, so the definition says this for each loop accepts two arguments. One is the callback function and second one is the this argument. So let's copy this as it is. Let's write function. This is going to be the definition. Okay, cool. So we have a for each function. It accepts the callback function and the this argument. Now let's go to specification and implement all the steps one by one. So let's go to step number 1 and let's try to implement this step. Step number 1 is going to be let O be to object in this value. Now if you are seeing this specification for the first time, this might seem very strange for you. You will not be able to understand this at the first attempt. So let me explain what does it mean. So let O be and to object. Question mark means if everything is fine, then O is going to be the object. As simple as that. If everything is fine on the right side, then O is going to be the object. Why object? Because we are converting the value of this to object. Now here this is the specification. So these two object method must be implemented by the JavaScript implementer, which is a Chrome, and Chrome is using a V8 engine. So V8 engine team has to implement this method. We do not need to worry about this method at all. We just have to take care that this is always going to be an object. If it is not an object, then we can simply throw an error. Now, okay. So let's move on and check if this is equal to null or this is equal to undefined. If this is the case, then we can always throw an error by saying that this must be an object. So far so good. So we have implemented the step 1 successfully. Now let's go to step number 2 and try to implement step number 2. Step number 2 is let length be question mark and length of array like this. This is an object. Now again, it simply means if everything is fine on the right side, then the length of this object is going to be stored in a len variable. As simple as that. Now what is this method? Length of array like. What does it mean? Length of array like means if you have an array like object, then you have to capture the length of the array like objects, right, by passing the object to it. So again, this method is going to be implemented by the JavaScript implementer, JavaScript engine implementer. So we do not need to worry about this method. We simply have to implement this step. How are we going to implement this method? First, we have to check two conditions here. First of all, maybe the length property does not exist on the array like object, or maybe the length property is negative. But in order to understand length property, first we need to understand what are what are array like objects. So let me show you an example. So let's create 3 array like objects. So let array like obj1 is equal to object. On 0th index we have hello, and on first index we have world. So you can see that this is a array like object. Why? Because array also stores values at a particular index, and we are also storing the values at a particular index. So it is kind of following the array structure. That's why in JavaScript world we call it array like objects. Now next, this is also going to be array like object, but this object has one more property, the length, and we have defined the length property is 2. It may be possible that we define the length property as negative, so still it's going to be an array like object only. Okay, and let's define the third array like object. The third array like object is going to be a string. So this is going to be the hello world. Why this is an array like object? Because we can use the square bracket notation to access the character of this string, correct? And this string has a length property. So if any object has these two things, one is it stores the values based on the key, and it has a length property, then we can say that this is going to be an array like object. So in this case, it's going to fetch the length property from the array like objects. So it may be possible that there is no length at all, like in this example, and there is a length but it is a negative. So we have to handle both the conditions. So let's handle first condition, that if. Okay, so we need the object for that. So okay, let's do one thing. Let's declare a variable obj and store the value of this into obj. As simple as that. Now simply call obj dot length. If we are not able to find the length property, then we can simply throw an error by saying length does not exist. As simple as that. And second, let's copy this. If length exists and the value of length is less than 0, means if it is a negative number, then we can say that length should not be negative number. As simple as that. So we have implemented step number 1 and step number 2. And what if both the conditions are false? Then we can simply store the property of length into length variable. As simple as that. And there we go. So far so clear. Now let's go to specification. Now let's implement the step number 3. So step 3 is going to be if callable. Now this step says that if the callback function is callable, then it's okay. If it is not callable, then we can throw a type error. What does it mean? It simply means that if callable function is not a function, then we can simply throw an error. So it is very simple to implement. We just check if callback function. We have to check type of callback function is not equal to function, then we can throw type error. So throw throw new type error by saying that callback function is not a function. Cool. So far so great. Let's go to step number 4. Now if everything is fine, we have checked everything. If it's an object, then we check the length exists. The length must be greater than 0 or equal to 0, or callback function is a function. So all the validation checks are done. Now we can start the algorithm. So step 4 says that we have to define a variable with the name k and initiate this variable with the value 0. Okay, to start the loop. And why we are starting a loop? To iterate all the elements of the array. So far so good. Now we have to start a while loop. Okay, so let's copy this piece of line. This is going to be our step 5. Okay, repeat while key less than length. Okay, let's implement. So let's use a while loop and then write k less than le and length. So till k is less than length, we are going to iterate all the elements of the array. As simple as that. We are good to go. Now we are inside the loop. Now let's implement the section A. Now this step says, what it says that pk be not to string. Okay, now this is again a jargon for you. What it does basically, we have k equal to 0, but as I said that JavaScript internally uses primitives, but in our case we are not going to deal with the primitives. We are using objects only. Okay, so this method simply says that we have to convert the k to a string. Why? Because k might be a primitive, and if it is okay, then we have to store this thing into a variable called pk. So let's define a variable. Let pk is equal to, let's call string function and pass it the k. Now this k is going to be converted into a string counterparts. Okay, so far so good. Then we have to check if this key is present in the array or not. Okay, let me explain what does it mean. Step B is going to be let k present b question mark has property. So here we are checking if a key is present at this position or not. Okay, so for example, let's say we have an array, okay, and in this array we have a values like 1, 2, then 3. So you can see that this is a sparse array. Why is it so? You can see a blank hole over here, okay. So we do not want to include this blank element, right? We only want to include 1, 2 and 3, that's it, if it's a sparse array. That's why we are checking if there is a value exist at kth position. If it is okay, then go forward, okay, then do the processing, otherwise leave it, okay. So for this we have to check if k presents. So for that we can define a variable let k present, and we can check if pk in obj. So here we are using the in operator to check if the key exists in the object or not, and if key present, then proceed with the other steps, as simple as that. Now if key present, then proceed with the other step. Now we are done with the step C. Now let's go to, okay, so this is going to be our step C, right? Now let's go inside the if condition. Now we have to find the value at this position, okay. Now step I is we have to find the k value. How we are going to find the k value? We have to find the key pk on this object. It will give us a k value. So for example, if I access the 0th key, I will get the hero. If I access the first key, I will get the world. As simple as that. How we are going to access? First we have to define a variable to store the value of that key. So let k value is equal to, we have obj, we are going to use the square notation, and then we pass it a pk, and pk is nothing but a index. As simple as that. Now we have a k value. Now if we have a k value, we have to just perform the call. Okay, this is the next step. Step 2 is going to be, we have to perform the call. Now what does it call? It's simply we have to call the callback function. So let's scroll up, let's copy the callback function, let's call it from here. So callback function dot call. So this is a call method which is available on all the functions in JavaScript. The first argument to call method is this argument, that which this binding we want to bind with this callback function. So it's simple, it's going to be this argument. Okay, the second arguments or the remaining arguments are, first is the value of the element, which is a k value, value of the array. Okay, the second thing is the value of k, which is an index, correct? So this is going to be our pk. Then third is going to be the object itself, right? As we saw in the definition, that first one is the element, second one is the index, and third one is the array itself. So first one is the value, which is the element of the array, second thing is the index, and the third one is the array itself. Now after this, what we have to do? The step D is set k to k plus 1. So step number B, C. Now let's go to step number D. So this element is processed. Now we can proceed to next element, right? So we can simply increment k is equal to k plus 1. Okay, this is the last step, and one more last step is the return undefined. So this is going to be the step 6. So till here we have step 4, and then here we are going to be a step 6, where we are going to return the undefined, which means this function does not return anything. Instead, it just applies the callback function on all the elements of the array. So far so good. Our algorithm is ready, and let's review it once again. So we have for each method which accepts the two arguments. One is the callback function, second one is this argument. Then we are checking if this is equal to null or undefined. If this is the case, we are throwing an error. as simple as that. Then we are converting this into object, then we are extracting the length property, then checking it. If it does not exist, we are throwing an error. Then we are checking if it is less than 0, we are again throwing an error. Then we are extracting the length property from object, then we are checking if the callback is a function or not. If it is not a function, we are throwing an error. Then we are initiating a variable k with a 0 to run a loop for all the elements. Then we are checking if k is less than length, and then run the loop, otherwise stop the loop if we reaches to the end of the array. Then we are converting k to string, and then we are finding if this key exists in the object. If it is exist, then find the value of this key, then call the callback function with this argument as a this binding for this callback, and then the value of the element, the index of the iteration or the index of the array, and then the object itself or the array itself, and then we simply increment the index by 1, as simple as that. And at last we are returning the undefined. So far so great, cool. Now let's define one more array, and this array is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3. So we have 4 elements in this array. Now we are going to run this method over these 4 examples. Okay, so with this we can check this condition, we can check this condition, this condition, and this condition. So we are going to check all of the conditions whether it is working or not. Great. So before we run this example, let's install one package, nodemon, so that we do not have to run this script again and again to see the output. So let's go to terminal, let's do npm init-y. We are good to go. Now let's install npm install nodemon. Let's go to package.json. In the script section, let's write nodemon nodemon app.js. We are good to go. Now we can run npm run nodemon, and it will start our script and it will watch for the changes. We are good to go. Okay, now let's call this method. So let's call for each dot. Again we are going to use the call method as we have used over here, and for this binding we are going to pass the array. Okay, and then the next argument is going to be the function, because this method accepts 2 arguments. One is the callback function and the second one is this argument. So for the function we are passing the anonymous function, and then this function is going to get 3 parameters. One is the value, so we call it lm. The second is going to be index, and the third one is going to be the object itself, or we call it array, or obj. So far so good. And now inside of this callback function we are going to call a console, and we are writing index at index this we have element this lm. So far so good. So we are good to run this code. Now let's go to terminal. We are calling the for each function by passing array as this binding, and then we are calling the callback function, which is this function, and this function receives 3 parameters. One is element, index, and object. As simple as that. Okay, now let's run npm run nodemon, and we get the error, console is not a function. Okay, my bad. So let's log console.log, and you will see that our for each method is perfectly working fine, and you can see the output that index 0 we have element 0, index 1 we have element 1, at index 2 we have element 2, and index 3 we have element 3. Now let's check all these conditions. So first, what happens if we pass null or undefined as this? So let's scroll down and let's pass null over here. and you will see that the error is thrown. The error says length does not exist, which means this piece of code is working absolutely fine. Now we need to check these two conditions. So let's give it an object which does not have a length property. So let's give it array like object1, save it, and you will see that the error is coming up which says length does not exist. So far so great. Now let's give it array like object2 which has a negative length, and now you will see that the array is again coming up which says length should not be negative. So all these three conditions are working fine. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Last condition is we are checking the callback function is a function or not. So for that we can copy this. We can simply remove the callback function, as simple as that, and instead we can pass undefined. If I save this file, and you will see that another error is thrown which says the callback function is not a function. So far all the conditions are working fine and our for each method is working absolutely fine. Now let's test this function with array like object3 and see whether it works or not. Okay, and you can see that all the elements are printed. As I said that this is a array like object because we can access all the character by using square bracket notation, and it has a length property. That's why it is an array like object. Okay, you can see that at index 0 we have h, then we have e, l, l, o, then we have space, then again we have w, o, r, l, d, and we are there. Now one thing is left, that we have not passed this argument to the for each method. Okay, so let's check this. So first of all, let's pass this argument, and this is going to be the second argument to this method. Okay, first one is the function itself, and the second one is this argument. Now it has a object, so we are passing this object as this argument, and this key has a value which says I am the this arg value. Okay, and then here we can print this. So the value, the context is going to be this dot key. Let's run the code, and you can see that our context is printed over here. I am this argument value. So this is the final implementation of the for each method. We are passing it a callback function and this argument, and then this argument will act as this binding for the callback function, and this callback function is receiving this object as this binding, and then we are capturing the key from this object and we are printing over here, and you can see the output over here. If I give array, then it will work absolutely fine. You can see the output over here, index 0, element 0, context I am this argument value. So far so great, cool. So guys, I hope now you have a very solid understanding around for each method of JavaScript array class. So still, if you have any doubt with any of the statement, go and watch this video again. You can go to the documentation of the for each method and try to understand this documentation. Go to ECMAScript documentation and try to understand this specification. So as an engineer, we should always learn from reading the documentation, and this is a very good skill set to read the documentation or specification to understand it better. And I hope if you will see this question in your upcoming interview, you will be very confident to implement this without any doubt. Alright guys, this is all from my side for this video. If you learned something valuable from this video, then please hit the like button in order to make YouTube algorithm happy. Please subscribe to this channel and don't forget to click the bell icon so my friend you never miss any upcoming videos. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.